Hi guys, we're going to talk a little bit about the use of oil pastels today. For your project, you can choose two analogous colors, which means colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. I'm using blue and green as my two colors. And I'm going to show you a little bit about sort of shading and making this appear as though it's a little bit more three-dimensional. If I was to just pick one color and fill in this flower, you would notice that it looked like a very flat blob shape. So I'm instead going to use a range of colors. Notice that even though I'm only using blues and greens, notice how many different styles of blues and greens you'll find within your box. So all of these are allowed, as well as the use of white. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take a study of my flower. And I want to look at it and notice, where do I notice it gets really light and where do I notice it's darkest? And I notice that it's darkest right in here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is find a very dark color that I have. I might use this dark blue. And I'm going to kind of just start by mapping out that dark area. A couple things about oil pastels. You'll find that since they've been used by students before, they might need some cleaning off. And you can just color on a scrap sheet of paper to remove that. You can also sharpen them. It's not really sharpening, but just like you would a crayon, by peeling off this extra piece here. So I'm just going to work in this space right in between. And oil pastels are kind of a neat fusion between a crayon and paint. They're kind of the halfway point. Our goal at the end is not to see any unplanned white. So right now this is kind of a sloppy coloring job. So I'm going to see what happens when I layer another color on top of it. And I'm going to clean this off because there's a lot of goop on there. I want it to be a nice, clean looking oil pastel. I would recommend keeping a scrap sheet of paper around so that as you're working and your fingers get dirty, you can be putting that underneath your hand so you're not making more of a mess. And I'm just going to use this to kind of blur the color together a little bit more so that I don't see any scribbly lines. So right now I want to keep this shape on here the darkest, because when I look at the flower, that's the darkest shape I see. And you can go over with oil pastels as many times as you want. I'm even going to go in here and add a little bit of a green. And the next thing I'm going to do after I've identified the darkest area is I'm going to do the opposite and find the light areas. And I notice, and I'm going to look like I'm crazy for a minute because I'm going to be coloring with white on white paper, but just like with paint, if I add white underneath, it's going to lighten the color. So I'm noticing that there's some light areas in here, and you'll be able to see pretty clearly. I'm just going to do this one petal. I notice that it's white, very light up through here, and we get a darker area kind of over here on the corner. So I'm going to map this out with a little bit of blue. Notice where the blue runs on top of the white that I already have on there. We get a pretty lighter color. You can also use neutral colors today. So neutral colors would be like browns and tans, but I'd like you to steer clear of using black. I'm going to just put really lightly a little bit of this in here to darken. Now my next step is to choose some blues or some greens or both to start filling in around here. And I'm going to start light. So I'm going to start with some of these colors. And you're really just trying to notice where the area of the flower is lighter and where it's darker. Not necessarily just a darker color, but a darker shade where you see shadows and where you see light areas. At the end, not only do we not want to see white paper, we also don't want to see pencil lines. So you'd make sure to go over this edge here with something that's a little bit darker, since this light minty green is not really covering the pencil very well. So you'll notice where the white was laid, you'll probably see a difference in what happens when you go over it with a color. Now I'm going to take yet another color, I don't know, maybe this light blue, and I'm just going to keep kind of adding and blending them in together. I'll hand something to you called a colorless blender. This one's really dirty, but basically it's a oil pastel that doesn't have, it doesn't come off as any color. It's like a clear oil pastel. And this can be used really simply to just kind of blur colors together.